Hello, everybody. We're going to just get things started here, get our technology moving. We're excited to be here tonight talking about some really important things. All right, so we're happy to be here. Tonight we're going to be talking about this idea of, can we love others too much?
Yeah, so a little bit of background here. This is a little bit of a follow-up on some things from the past week. One is an essay that I posted on my Substack. You may have seen it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in that, but then also an experience that a friend of Anne's had, and we'll kind of go through that. And it all kind of piled together in the same week, and so it seemed like this was the topic that we need to be talking about this week.
Yeah.
So starting with we titled this, "Can we love others too much?" And this comes from a question that has popped up a number of times, and it came up recently in a conversation that both of us were in with someone in our ward, and we were talking about people who are LGBT or different a variety of things, and how it's important that we just love everybody. And this person said, well, like up to a certain point, right? Like
you still have to keep the commandments, and
they're like, you don't want to love them too much. And we were like, what? Like what is happening here? And the person we were talking to is a really smart spiritual person, and so this was kind of out of left field for me. But there's this idea, and you can probably guess where this is going, but the idea is that if you're loving somebody too much, especially if they have the lifestyle you don't agree with or something like that, then if you love them too much, then you are enabling their sinful behavior. That you are just allowing that to happen instead of speaking out.
Yeah, warning them of where they're going wrong.
Right, exactly. So my take on this is that in my personal discipleship, I cannot entertain a theological concept of loving people too much. I think we need to just keep loving people. I think our heavenly parents and Jesus Christ have given us this abundance of love and grace and mercy, and I think that my responsibility and my privilege as a Christian is to reflect that abundance to the people around me. And I'm not great at it, but I'm trying really hard, and I just don't think that there's a scenario where we are loving people too much, like more than Jesus asked us to. Really, I think Jesus taught exactly the opposite of that idea of loving too much. I mean, he said we should love our enemies. He said we should forgive everyone. He said we shouldn't judge. Like, that all is kind of in stark contrast to that idea of like, oh, we need to like draw a line somewhere of how much we love.
Yeah. So the contrast comes, I think, when you claim that because you are keeping certain commandments and you believe certain things, that out of love, you are going to tell somebody where they are going wrong.
Right.
So I think that's where this kind of rub is with this. And that's what happened to my friend. And I posted about this week, that she received an anonymous letter in the mail, saying, because Pride Month is over, I'm going to kindly ask that you take down your pride flag. Here are all the reasons that pride flags are bad. It's a mental illness to be gay, and spouted off all these really horrible things, and said that the pride flag is a symbol of Sodom and Gomorrah, which, like, if you listen to Dan McClellan, he cuts that myth in half, and
yep.
That's not a thing. And kept saying throughout this letter, we want to have love in our neighborhood, and we're just concerned, and you're harming our children, and by having this flag that we have to explain to them what the flag means, and so will you kindly take it down? Completely inappropriate sort of letter, and to say that because of the love you have for this person, you are going to tell them how to live their life, that to me is a very misguided thing. And so we kind of want to talk tonight about judgment, judging others. Where do we draw the line? Is there a line for loving people versus warning them? Like, we have a lot of historical background in our church where we are told to warn our neighbor.
Yes.
That is a very big concept. So let's dive into that. And if you're watching, please leave some comments, jump into the conversation. We'll make sure to read them, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and stuff as we go.
Yeah. So there's a fair amount, when we're talking about a topic like this, I try to make sure to look at, there are intelligent people that disagree with me on this, and what is it that they are seeing? And so, Anne's referenced a number of times, you're probably reading between the lines that verse from D&C 88 about it becometh every man who hath been warned to warn his neighbor. And there's an abundance of scriptural support for the idea that you need to speak out if you are looking for it. Now that particular verse in D&C 88 is probably more about missionary work than about like telling your neighbor to take down their pride flag.
Yeah.
And so you kind of got to be cognizant of the context there. I pulled a couple other verses that kind of speak to that, just so we can kind of lay the groundwork here. There's one in Matthew 18, and I purposely took this out of context. So
this is what people do.
If other people can do it, I can do it, right? Anyway, it says, moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault. And that's not where it ends. But like, if you took that snippet of the verse, it literally says, go tell him what he's doing wrong, kind of a thing. But more familiar is like from D&C 1, and it shows up in Alma 2, I can't remember where. For I, the Lord, cannot look upon sin with the least degree of allowance. Things like that.
Well, and I want to share another one from D&C 1. It's verse 4, and it says, the voice of warning shall be unto all people by the mouths of my disciples, whom I have chosen in these last days. So if you leave off those whom I have chosen part, then you really feel like, I'm a disciple, I get to do this.
Right.
If we add on the whom I have chosen, is that the 12, the 15?
Interesting.
Where does that, where do we fit in with that? Do we fit in?
And there's more, the reproving betimes with sharpness from D&C 121. There's is it Nephi or Jacob who talks about he has to speak these hard things that are going to, offend people, but the wicked take the truth to be hard.
So much
as
a weapon.
Yeah, and
that's so hard.
So we can definitely see why people get this mindset of like, I need to be a crusader. I need to wield the sword of truth and tell people when they're doing the wrong thing.
We even sing that.
Oh,
our hymns teach us to do that. Yeah,
they absolutely
can't get away
do.
from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would hold, except for it's really very contrary to the things that Jesus taught. And you don't have to go very far in the New Testament to find judge not lest ye be judged, and
love one another.
Love one another. And how many times should I forgive? 7? 70? No, 70 times 7, and these sorts of things. And so it's almost not even worth citing individual verses because it's such a thematic presence throughout all of the Gospels. And into the rest of the New Testament as well. This is a major, major thing that Jesus taught.
Yeah. I think oftentimes when we read it in the scriptures, it is talking about prophets. Prophets have a role to warn groups of people.
Sure.
A broad, like they are supposed to be that warning call for a broad group of people. And somehow we have internalized it as this is my duty as a member of the church to tell someone else when they are doing wrong, and we could not be farther from our real role.
Well, I want to highlight again the difference between missionary work, which does show up many, many times, especially in the Doctrine and Covenants, as a commandment for all of us. We get kind of this every member a missionary sort of thing out of that. But again, that's not the same as judging your neighbor because they sin differently than you do.
Yeah. Yeah, the scripture, especially that one in D&C 88, is talking about what we said earlier. It's missionary work. They're telling these, I think they were high priests that they were telling to go out and be missionaries. And I think it was in there that it says for the people that have covenanted through a baptismal covenant and you've received the gospel, you are now to go and tell the gospel to other people and to warn your neighbor. And so that is very specific to missionary work. And it gets tricky when we have this phrase of every member a missionary. You know, people can use that and be like, well, if every member is a missionary, I get to warn my neighbor. But it's specifically talking about sharing the gospel.
Right.
Telling people the good news that we have in this church, which is there is beautiful doctrine. There are great things. That is the way that we're supposed to be missionaries to other people, and totally through our example, of course, not going out pinpicking, telling people through anonymous letters what they're doing wrong.
Right.
That is not the call from our church leaders, from Jesus, from anyone.
Well, and consider, how often does judging change someone's heart? You know, it's just not the approach that's going to work. It's going to do more harm than good.
Yeah.
And that's just how that is. We have a really great comment. You want to read that?
Yeah. From Jenny, she says, some people, when their pride flag is stolen from their yard, put up a bigger pride flag inside their huge front room window, hypothetically. Maybe a little experience there?
Hypothetically. Just, that could possibly happen.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens with political flags, too. Or signage.
Hypothetically.
We don't know much about that.
Not saying anything about that. Now, one thing that I've heard, I've actually heard this applied in the context of the two great commandments. And I don't understand or agree with this. I can explain it, but I don't agree with it. Because you remember the two great commandments. The first one is to love God. The second one is to love your neighbor. And I've heard it explained that the love God one means making sure that other people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it's taken in this way of defending God and his gospel. Again, I'm gonna wield the sword of truth and the breastplate of righteousness, and I'm gonna go out there because I love God so much that I'm gonna be an a-hole to my neighbors. Was that too far?
That came out of left field. Sorry.
All right, that might have been too much.
Oh, okay.
I'm still on the pride flag story. That's not how I read the commandment to love God. I think kind of it says what it's trying to say, which is love God. Which you can go to the New Testament, which is the thing about when did we clothe thee, when did we feed thee? Well, when we were taking care of others and the marginalized and these sorts of things. Here's my thought on this. Jesus gave us two great commandments. The first one is to love. And the second one is to love. That's it. Full stop. That's all there is. There are two great commandments, and they're both to love.
Yeah. I think when I hear that kind of explanation of like, well, because I love God, I have to tell everyone else what they're doing wrong. It doesn't say love God by judging others.
Right.
It doesn't say show your love of God by judging others. I think that these commandments are completely personal. They are not,
okay. Yep.
Here's some commandments for you to tell other people what to do. That's not how commandments work. Are there any commandments where I get to say, I am following this commandment because of what I'm doing to somebody else? Other than love your neighbor.
Not in a negative way, don't in a positive way.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not like, honor your father and mother. There are things about other people, but it's not.
But that's a love commandment.
Yeah, and I don't get to take my commandment and say, I'm going to do this whether you like it or not, I don't know. These are personal commandments. I love God, and because I love God, I'm going to love my neighbor even more. Right.
That's how I'm going to show it, and that's kind of what we've been taught. comment from Anya. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. But it says, how can you love God if you are not truly loving everyone made in their image?
Yeah.
Right on.
Nailed it.
Right on. I think that's it exactly. So, there are a couple of examples that come up from the New Testament with some regularity, that people anchor on a little bit too much, almost to the point where you kind of go, man, I wish that wasn't in there. And one is when Jesus is cleansing the temple and he's flipping the tables.
Yeah.
And he makes a whip out of leather, and we get this like quasi-violent scene from Jesus, which if you wanted to take that a certain direction, you could say, well, Jesus got angry and confrontational, so I can angrily confront sinners. And I can do what he did.
That's not how it works.
that's not how it works. And if you're reading just a tiny bit farther into the story, he's opposing something very specific. Those who are trying to gain from the gospel and those who were gatekeeping the temple. So the poor couldn't afford to get in. It was people who had twisted the gospel the wrong way.
Yeah, I'm trying to find in this, I love the podcast Everything Belongs with Richard Rohr. It is so good. I quote it all the time. He's probably sick of me.
Every day I get a message. She's like, okay, I was listening to another episode.
So they were talking about how we call people out with things, and we can look at our country right now or at any given time and find leaders that are doing things that we don't like. This is not just, we're not picking sides. Anybody can find a leader at some point in our history that they didn't like what was going on.
Yep.
Right. And, and we can call out that singular person and look to them, and they hold so much hate and, all of that. And Richard and the two guys, Mike and Paul, that he talks to, were talking about how we don't need to spend our time focusing on the sins of one person, but rather the systems that make that person able to do what they're doing. Does that make sense? Like we should, again, this is kind of what I was saying earlier, as a prophet is to call a wide group back to repentance. Paul's letters, all the prophet stuff, it's to groups of people. He's not calling out one single person
to the body of the church.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so if we need to call people to repentance or call people in to teach and educate about what is going on wrong, let's actually work on the system that is causing the problem and not necessarily calling out the wrong person or a single person.
Yeah.
And I want to bring up this question. I'll pose this question to you.
Okay, great.
Let me get back to my question. What is the difference between sending a letter like this, where somebody is saying, I don't like what you're doing, I don't like your pride flag, you need to take it down for these reasons? What's the difference between that and doing a post on social media saying, all of you that follow this certain person, you're all horrible people, you need to be better? What's the difference between those things? Like, how do we be better social media followers, people like involved in social media, where we want to call out wrongs? We want to tell people what we are seeing that is wrong. We have a conscience that is burning inside of us, this is not right. Something has to change. How do we do that? What is there a difference between that and sending a letter?
My initial instinct, and those that are watching, feel free to chime in the comments. My initial instinct is no, that it's not different.
When you call out in that way of, all of you who do this, you're being jerks. So because that's punitive and not based in love, and sort of stuff.
What you just said, I'm thinking about the motivation behind it.
Okay.
And when it's driven from hate and it's driven from anger, I don't know that it's going to be the right approach. And I'm not the one to say like, oh, our post should be written this way or whatever. But there's got to be a way to do it that's constructive. We've actually talked about this in an Instagram Live before, about that kind of social media vitriol.
Doesn't help anything.
It doesn't help anything. It's like we said earlier, you don't change hearts by judging people, and you don't change hearts by insulting people. Either. And so if that's your point, is to try to win people over to your side or something, you're gonna have to do it differently than something that's fueled by hate and anger. That's my thought. What's your thought?
Yeah, I do think your motivation matters. And I maybe again it's calling out systems that allow these people that we don't agree with to be in power, or that allow racism to happen or sexism to happen. Like, we can call out the individuals so that they have an awareness of what they did. I think cancel culture has gotten wildly out of hand, and I heard on a podcast recently they believe that we need to have an education culture instead, which is kind of what I view as calling in, where we're helping people understand what they're doing wrong, but it's in a way of like, let me hold your hand and walk through this with you so that you can understand what's happening and the impact of your words. But I do think there's a comment here of anonymity is different. Yes, when we're doing social media stuff, often anonymity plays a part, or these letters play a part. I think just calling out systems is going to be better than pointing fingers at individual people or spewing hate.
Yeah.
Even if you're saying, well, I'm doing it out of love. I love you so much that I want to tell you that you're an idiot for voting this way. That isn't going to help anything.
Yeah.
You're not going to gain any respect from anyone.
Right. You said that a little nicer than I did.
Yes.
There are some other comments, back on the Jesus flipping tables when cleansing the temple, calling out the power differential
100%.
There, that the people Jesus chased with whip were exploiting their position of power over others. Love that.
Yeah.
That actually comes back to systems as well.
Yeah.
Systems, positions of power, that tends to be hand in glove. And then also reiterating the prophetic critique always speaks truth to power. So again, that seems to be coming out.
Yeah. And there's a comment here too of what it comes down to on social posts is contention versus compassion.
Nice.
Yeah. So your motivation is really going to drive how that comes across.
Yep. Yeah. Now, another example I wanted to share from the scriptures is the woman taken in adultery in the New Testament. Because I've heard this one weaponized a little bit before, which is Jesus said, go and sin no more. So we should do that too. We should go tell people, go and sin no more.
Oh dear.
But I actually read that story differently. And I think maybe that's taking the wrong lesson out of that story. Because we can actually read ourselves into different people in that story. One, we can read ourselves as the woman because we are sinful, sure. And also not condemned by God. And that's pretty great. But oftentimes in these stories, we tend to insert ourselves as the sympathetic character when I think, and this one's not a parable, but oftentimes in the parables, I think Jesus is trying to show us that we're not the good guy in the story.
Yeah.
And I think we can read ourselves into the hypocrites in this story, the men who Jesus only said, go and sin no more, after he stopped these men who wanted to stone her for what she had done. And so, there's a really big difference there. And if we see ourselves as, I need to make sure I'm not the hypocrite who is trying to stone somebody.
Yeah. There's something that I heard from Richard Rohr, my favorite, that I love. He says, as we're trying to figure out how to interact with these people that we see, we observe things all the time. We're seeing stuff happen that it's human nature to have judgments, right? In anti-racism, we always say, don't follow your first thought about something. That first thought is going to be your implicit bias. So don't lean into your first thought. What matters is what you do with your second thought.
Okay. Yeah. Love that.
But Richard says, see everything, overlook a great deal, and correct a little. I think that is really interesting. I also saw it as, instead of correct a little, but forgive much. which I think is so
Mm-hmm.
good, because we all have a desire. We're all sinners, like you said. We're all the people
of
that
course.
want to throw stones at other people. At
Yep.
some point in our life, we all have need of forgiveness and mercy from God. Why would we withhold that from other people
Right.
when we are sinners just as much?
Mm-hmm.
And that actually comes from, that comes from a lot of things.
Sure.
But Elder Uchtdorf had a great talk called The Merciful Obtain Mercy. And he says, when it comes to our own prejudices and grievances, we too often justify our anger as righteous and our judgment as reliable and only appropriate. Though we cannot look into another's heart, we assume that we know a bad motive or even a bad person when we see one. We make exceptions when it comes to our own bitterness because we feel that in our case, we have all the information we need to hold someone else in contempt. And then he says, because we all depend on the mercy of God, how can we deny to others any measure of the grace we so desperately desire for ourselves?
Love that.
It's so wonderful.
That's so good.
Yeah. We have to realize we're in just as much need of grace and mercy.
Right.
And we have to extend that to everybody. Instead of going around and judging people, why don't we go around and love? And that's actually another thing that Elder Uchtdorf said. He talks about this scripture in Luke 6:38, where we're talking about give and it shall be given unto you, a good measure pressed down, for with the same measure that you meet withal, it shall be measured.
Sure.
So whatever
Yeah,
you give, you're going to get back, sort
Right.
of thing.
Right.
And he says, shouldn't this promise be enough to always focus our efforts on acts of kindness, forgiveness, and charity instead of negative behavior? I really love that.
Yeah.
Like, why would we spend our time writing an email or a letter that we're going to send anonymously to someone that bothers us, instead of loving that person and getting to know them and really like working with people,
Right.
building community, building bridges, trying to understand people, be curious about people. Like, there's so many things that would be better for us to spend our time on, making dumb comments on Instagram lives. Like, there are better things we can be doing with our time
Sure.
than judging people and making assumptions about people.
Yep. And I love where this is going, because I have a bunch more thoughts and notes about don't judge. But I like where you've taken this, which is the opposite of that is loving other people, trying to understand other people, and again, reflecting that abundance of love and grace and mercy that we've gotten from our heavenly parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and maybe that's the antidote, right? Is if we're in that mood where we need to judge others, then we fall back on, this is what I've been given. This is the gift that we've been given from God, is all of this grace in all of the mistakes that we make, which is, every day. And the idea, this goes back to the woman taken in adultery again, because the message was, whoever is without sin among you, go ahead and throw the first stone. And none of us are without sin. I posted something about this on my social media, and somebody commented, I think they were maybe of a different faith. It actually doesn't really matter in this case, but they said, well, Jesus taught us to work on our own sin first and then turn to other people. And I was kind of like, gosh, like, when are you done working on your own sin? And so that kind of harkens to like this, the thing about trying to get the mote out of somebody else's eye when you have a beam in your own eye. Mm-hmm. But the story doesn't go, once you've successfully removed the beam, then
move on to your neighbor.
Yeah. It is like sort of worded like that, but I think almost in a almost a joke kind of way. Like, okay, once you've succeeded with that, then you can go ahead and judge others. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if that really exists in Scripture, but that's kind of how I read that, because we're never done working on ourselves. We need that grace and that mercy every single day from God. Mm-hmm. And so we have, again, the responsibility, and I think it's a privilege to show that mercy and love to the people around us.
Yeah. So let's kind of wrap up with this talk again from Elder Uchtdorf, from his talk. Sorry, this quote from Elder Uchtdorf. He talks about when we have a need to judge, when we see something that we want to pass judgment on someone else, he says, I have a simple thing for you to do. Stop it. Just stop it. He says, we simply have to stop judging others and replace judgmental thoughts and feelings with a heart full of love of God and his children. I think that pulls it back to what we were saying about the 2 great commandments.
Yeah.
We have to love God. When we love God, we are going to understand and see others as children of God.
Yeah.
We're going to understand so much more about who we all are. There are brothers and sisters. You know, we are going to just be filled with love for God and for our neighbor. When we get rid of the judgment and replace those thoughts with a heart full of love of God and his children, their children. I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Like, what else is there to say?
Yep. All right. Well, we'll end it on that note. Appreciate all of you. You know, all this stuff about loving our neighbor, it's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I won't pretend to be perfect at it or even close, but that's the journey that we're all on together.
Yeah.
So, appreciate all of you. Thanks for joining. Thanks for all the comments, and we will see you next time.
See ya.